So hello everybody, welcome. So today's event is a conversation with Aisha Harris. My name is Dave Junker, and I have the distinct privilege of being your host and moderator for today's discussion. I'm also a proud member of the faculty in the Moody College of Communication and specifically the School of Advertising and Public Relations. I'm also the director of the Moody College Honors Program, the lead sponsor for today's event. So on behalf of the program, yeah, you can go ahead and do that, that's cool. So thank you all for braving the downpour to be here with us today. Before I introduce our guest, let me just take a moment for some thank yous and some shout outs. First, thank you to David Reif, Chair of the School of Journalism and Media, for being a co-host of our event today. Also, a thanks to the Dean's Office and the Moody Foundation for ongoing support and funding for events and programming like this today. I also want to thank our department chairs, all of the department chairs, especially my own, Natalie Tyndall, for supporting our curriculum and course scheduling every semester. The honors program wouldn't work and wouldn't be a great experience without that support and cooperation. Also, a thanks to Mark Bunting for letting us use his classroom. This is actually his classroom. He has a class in here right now, and he's letting us use it for this event today. So thanks to Mark and his class. Who else do I need to thank? I especially need to thank Keith Berner back there. Thank you always for the expert tech help and help getting set up. And of course, our awesome honors coordinator and FIG mentor, April Cafaro. Round of applause. Thanks for all the hard work making this event happen. So, and a few welcomes. Welcome to Amy Sanders and her class. Amy, I don't know if you're out there. There's Amy. And her class on social media law and ethics are here today. Also, my students in Com 307. Shout out to all of you. We've been reading this book, Aisha's new book, in our class, and they've been leading discussion on it. We've been having some great discussions, and so I'm looking forward to our Q&A session. Here are the mics when we're ready for that. So about how it's going to work. So in a moment, I'm going to give a proper introduction to our guest, and then we'll sit down together for a brief conversation, some Q&A, and then we'll open things up to questions from the audience. So we're expecting to have a lot of great questions, and we'll save time for that. So Aisha Harris, as I hope you know, is a co-host and reporter for the NPR podcast Pop Culture Happy Hour. She previously covered the arts as a critic, editor, and podcaster for the New York Times and Slate magazine. Her subjects have included film and TV criticism, artist interviews, and cultural reporting and essays. And she's appeared on numerous radio and TV programs as a cultural commentator. She earned her bachelor's degree in theater from Northwestern University and her master's degree in cinema studies from New York University. She's the author of the essay collection Wannabe, Reckonings with the Pop Culture That Shapes Me, which we're going to talk about presently. So please join me in welcoming Aisha Harris. Welcome, Aisha. Thanks for coming.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for being here. And I got to be here on the 1 or 2 days I've heard that it rains here. So thanks for braving the rain.
That's right. Everything came together. The planets aligned so that we would have our downpour. All our prayers were answered. We finally got rain. So first of all, congratulations on the book.
Thank you.
It's a big accomplishment, and for its success, you've been getting great reviews.
Yeah.
It's been, from my perspective as an educator in culture, communication, media, a kind of welcome gift because you talk about complicated things and concepts through stories and also through a kind of clear prose that you're not always used to reading. Students, am I right, in your textbooks? So anyways, we're going to talk about the book, but first I was thinking, that most people know you by your voice, Aisha Harris,
Yes.
as one of the co-hosts of Pop Culture Happy Hour. Can you tell us a little bit about that? How long have you been doing it? What's it all about?
Yeah, I've been at NPR since 2020. Actually, my 3-year anniversary was last month. It's funny because I was actually listening to Pop Culture Happy Hour way before I was ever even a guest on the show. It was one of the very first podcasts I ever started listening to. This was back when podcasting was very much still in its infancy and did not have the robust sort of following and revenue stream that it does now. And I was just looking for pop culture related podcasts to listen to. I was in between undergrad and grad school. And when I eventually sort of moved into my career and started becoming sort of a guest host, because we have guest hosts frequently on the show, and a rotating guest host before I joined as a full-time host. I was just so happy. I was like, oh my God, I listen to these people all the time.
Right.
And I didn't even know what they looked like. I never like decided to Google them. I just kind of, I don't even think I had an image of what they looked like. They were just like blobs in my head, and just like voices and disembodied voices. I'm not sure if you all have like, well, I realized that my face was like on the event page, but I don't know how many people, like if you listen to podcasts, like how often are you actually like Googling what they actually look like? Or do you just like kind of have this picture of them in your brain and you don't want to like disturb it? But I don't know if I look the way I sound, but it's me. So
we were talking a little bit about this earlier. We had a Q&A with students, some podcasting students, members of the Drag Audio, and other students who listen to podcasts. Of course, podcasting is more popular now. Podcasting has sort of always been a thing if you think about radio. Right? There's always been radio and talk radio, news programming radio, and so on and so forth. But I'm of a much older vintage than you. You're of a slightly older vintage than most of you. And NPR has this kind of a iconic place in your like oral landscape, right? Your memory. And yes, there's also sort of iconic voices.
Yeah.
Which I imagine can be kind of imposing when you're thinking, oh, now I'm going to be a member of NPR.
Yeah, I mean, we were talking about that earlier. And, you know, there is, luckily, the great thing about this quote unquote podcasting boom is the fact that now, well, the great and the bad thing is like, first of all, anyone can make a podcast. That doesn't mean everyone should, but everyone can. And that means that we have a wider breadth of people and voices that are being represented. And we no longer have to like, when you think of I mean, of course, just like Barbie, it's like, Barbie is blonde, Margot Robbie, she's the like stereotypical Barbie. And that movie tried to like move away from it. I feel like NPR is similar, where it's like you have the NPR voice. It's like Ira Glass, Terry Gross. But now we have way more voices, people like the other Aisha at NPR, Aisha Rasco, who has a very, very distinct voice. And we're no longer sort of like trapped in this like box of what it can sound like. And really, when we say like NPR voice, or when we used to say NPR voice, and we thought of Ira Glass, we were thinking white guy. Mm-hmm. That's never been the case, but like especially now, thankfully, it's no longer the case that is the only voice that we hear in public radio.
So there's a more diverse set of voices that we can hear on the radio.
Absolutely.
And you've seen how like NPR has moved from a lot of mainly hard news broadcasting. Of course, there's always been kind of in-depth magazine style programming through NPR, but like the Culture Desk hasn't been around forever, right? That's fairly new. They've had episodes or topics on race and culture for quite a while.
Yeah.
And tell me about what you cover in Pop Culture Happy Hour. It sounds so fun, doesn't it? Pop Culture Happy Hour. It's what you do after work. Yeah. All of the hard news that you just were forced to listen to, right? Yeah. Is it as much fun as it sounds?
I mean, look, it's a dream job. I get to watch movies and watch TV shows and like go see Beyonce and then talk about it for a living. Granted, I had to shell out the money for a Beyonce ticket. Like it was rent, but I did it. because it was fun and I got to talk about it. But it is still a job. We are a conversational podcast. We chatter, we have guests on, and it's not like we have a set script for the conversation. We might have questions that as hosts we intend to ask, but we might not even get to those questions depending on how the conversation is flowing. That being said, there is a lot of prep that goes into creating the show, and we have a full production team who is doing research for us, getting pronunciations for names of people we're going to talk about in the show, factoids about the creators, what their previous works were that we can maybe reference during the conversation. And we also, as hosts, we do have like a short script that opens every episode, a brief intro, and then like a table setting to sort of describe, Never Have I Ever is a show created by Mindy Kaling, and it's about this character, like brief setup. So there is a structure, and there is a format and formula within the sort of like loose form of the show.
Mm-hmm. So when you're producing the show, it sounds like you're all in the same room or all in the same studio because it's happy hour. Right?
Yeah.
But you're not
also,
actually,
I will say we're not actually drinking when we're doing the show. There are I have been guests on podcasts where we do drink. I actually just did one a couple weeks ago with some new friends of mine who I live in the Bay Area and they're in the Bay Area, and they have a great little podcast, TV show podcast called Bitch Talk. It's great. And we met up in a bar in Oakland, and the audio quality may not have been ideal, but like it's a fun chatter. So that was like it was actually happy hour. It was actually a pop culture happy hour.
Right. So a little
but at
more
NPR,
fun.
We do not drink.
Right. That wouldn't be consistent with the image there, would it?
No. And we are also not in the same room. So
right.
To your point, when I joined, we were still, this is like September of 2020. So this was still firmly, at least where we were, other parts of the country not, but still firmly like lockdown and not going out. And so we've been recording, as long as I've been on the show, we've been recording in our homes. Mm-hmm. And half of my team is actually in the DMV area, like DC, Maryland, because that's where NPR's headquarters are. And I'm in the Bay, and I have a little nook in my apartment that I like bought IKEA, very heavy duty IKEA curtains to like pad out. It's not the most perfect
for sound.
Yeah, it's not the, but no one's complained. Like people actually can't really tell the difference. We've actually only recorded one episode in the same room together when we had like a mini retreat.
Okay, which episode was that? I don't know if I've heard it or not. But.
Yeah, that was the episode earlier this year. We were covering, I think it was the summer. We were like planning for like what we were excited for to watch this summer.
Right.
So this was like, I think we recorded in May. I think it came out in like late May.
Yeah. How many of you have heard the show? Okay. Do you feel fooled, duped that it's not all in the same room? It sounds like it though, doesn't it? So that's pretty impressive.
Well, the plus side is that when it's actually easier to record separately because we're all recording on our own setups, our own mics. And so we can do crosstalk and they can just kind of edit it easily. When we're all in the same room, you can't step over someone talking.
Right.
Or else it's gonna like, the editors have to do a lot more work on their end. So when we're all like recording on separate tracks, they can just align and overlap the tracks.
If you were in a room together, there'd be visual cues, right? I'm about
Zoom.
To say something.
We're on Zoom.
And
so we can see each other on Zoom and we can, anticipate if someone is trying to jump in or is trying to say something.
So you moved from Slate to New York Times. While you were at Slate, you started a podcast. I did. A lot of what you've been doing prior to Pop Culture Happy Hour is print and writing.
Yeah.
So how is this? What is this shift like? What's different about these mediums, and are there pros and cons?
Yeah. I mean, one thing that I've definitely learned that is different is the fact that like writing for people to read is very different from writing for audio. We discussed this earlier in our smaller group conversation, but like audio, you got to be short sentences to the point, because when you only have audio clues and you don't have a visual, the human brain can only process so much at a time, and so you have to keep it concise, and you cannot write flowery sentences like I like to do when I'm writing for the page. If you've read the book, there are some very long passages of run-on sentences, and like I'm sure my third grade English teacher thinks it's like I've broken all the rules. But yeah, you can't write like that for audio, and that's something I think that I have had to like learn how to flip that switch in my brain of going from writing for print / digital to writing for when I'm going to be speaking audibly the what I've written. In fact, like I recorded the audiobook version of this. Reading this was hard because like there's a lot of asides and there's a lot of, but this is where my theater background came in real handy, because I was like, oh, I get to like act out some parts and do voices, and like I did a really bad impression of Dave Chappelle in here. Like it was fun, but it was also really challenging, because I was this was not written to be read aloud, even though I kind of knew that I might be reading it aloud at some point.
Right. So when you're in the newsroom, sometimes you can pitch assignment ideas, right? Sometimes you get the assignments. So, but when you're going into something like pop culture happy hour, you've got like 3, 4, sometimes 5 people in the room. How do you decide on topics?
Well, we have like a daily meeting, kind of a check-in with our team, and it's a lot of, one of the big things that our producer does is like it's so much scheduling, and there's so many parts to it, because it's not just scheduling the host, but it's also coordinating schedules with the guests that we bring in, also coordinating when we're going to be able to see movies and TV shows. So like with TV shows, like we get screeners because it's all streaming. That's easy enough to do. You just have to like coordinate with a publicist and be like, okay, when are these screeners going to be available? Are we going to have them in time for our hosts and our guests to watch and prepare adequately for the episode? Movies is a little trickier. In fact, like this time of year is the busiest every year because it's award season time. Every big movie is coming out in the next 6 to 8 weeks. I'm going to 4 different press screenings next week. That's on top of like the TV that I have to watch at home. There's a lot of moving parts. It's like, and a lot of the pitching of ideas, some of it is based around release dates, things that are coming up, and we have like a standing list.
Newshook.
It's really about like trying to stay ahead and trying to see what's coming down the pipeline and being aware. And it's not just like what's new is coming out, but it's also like, are there any anniversaries for like something that we might want to talk about? I'm trying to think of like a good example, a recent example. I think I think we did an episode. Oh, so last year was actually the 50th anniversary of NPR. So like we, at all parts of NPR, the news desk, politics, culture desk, music, like everyone was doing some sort of like 50th anniversary. For us, for our show, we did an episode about like, we brought our favorite like pop culture from 1972, like each of us guests. So there's like evergreen stories, and we record evergreen episodes to like have in our back pocket in case like scheduling falls through, or just to like have to fill our plates. But also it's a lot of day-to-day, depending on release schedules. And with the WGA and the SAG strikes, those have kind of affected us in interesting ways, because release dates were moving for a lot of movies that we thought were coming out this month or this fall. They got pushed to next year. So there's so much of the job is actually about like looking at your calendar. And I imagine a lot of pop culture related shows are kind of in a similar boat as well. Yeah.
maybe we can ask you later for your kind of hot takes on some of the newer movies and maybe some recommendations for things. But first, let's pivot to the book. So the book, in contrast to working for, NPR, a news outlet of any sort, is the agenda is sort of yours now, and you don't have that kind of news, that timeliness variable, right, governing what you choose to do. So why did you choose to do the book, and what is it about the book that that you wanted to do with it?
When you are a journalist or you work in media, like writing a book is like one of those things you're kind of expected to eventually do. And I'm not saying that I did it because I felt like I had to, but it was definitely something that like I wanted to be able to say that I did for myself.
Mm-hmm.
And when I was approached by an editor about the idea of writing a book, I like finally had an idea, and I was like, look, my mode, what I like to do when I'm writing is I like to write essays, and ask any editor who's had the privilege of editing me. They know that I go long. I write too much, and we gotta whittle this down. You want 1,200 words? I might give you 3,000, and we're gonna have to work together to get it to where you want it to be. So this is an opportunity for me to like go longer than I've ever gone before. Like some of these essays are hovering around 7,800 words, 8,000 words. So that's like the formal, like that was the formal challenge for myself. But I also saw this as an opportunity. Like I realized that a lot of the pieces that I've written have been personal, and the ones that have been like resonated with people have been personal. Whether it was, and I write about this in the book, me trying to say that Santa Claus should not be a white man anymore, and then Megyn Kelly from formerly of Fox News getting upset about it and it turning into a whole thing. And that was just me writing about my experience as a kid growing up, where like in the house, Santa was black, but then everywhere else he was white. And I was like, why is he like this? And my dad's like, well, Santa Claus just becomes whatever race he is when he goes down the chimney. And I'm like, but we don't have a chimney. And it's like,
Right.
And I used that as like, that the piece I wrote was me sort of just saying, look, let's just make him a penguin. Everyone loves penguins. It's race neutral. Like, why not? And she got upset, and then it turned into a whole thing. So like when I realized that like those kind of personal pieces resonated,
right.
I wanted to sort of approach this as like part memoir, an exploration of like what it's like for me as a pop culture critic to like think about pop culture, perhaps more so than the average person does, but also show how pop culture influences all of us, regardless of who we are, what our background is. Pop culture is political. If it wasn't, then like they wouldn't be trying to ban books. They wouldn't be trying to ban drag shows. Artists wouldn't be getting upset at certain politicians for using their songs because they're like, I don't agree with you. Like, there's all these ways that pop culture just it affects who we are and how we interact with the world around us. And this is kind of what the book is about, is me exploring, excuse me, all the different ways, whether it's me as a Black woman, as a millennial, as a critic, as a thinker, how it shaped me and how we also have the power to shape it right back.
Right. And that's part of your title, Shapes Me, Pop Culture Shapes Me. I want to ask you about one other word in your title, and that's Reckonings.
Yes.
So it seems like there's maybe reckonings going on at different levels in this book. Why did you choose that word for the title?
I mean, it's dramatic, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's very dramatic. But I also think like that's how I view my relationship to pop culture, is this constant push and pull and this constant like tension between like liking something or disliking something, and then like how I think how that makes me feel about myself, or how I think that makes other people perceive me. So like one of the chapters focuses pretty closely on our very fraught relationship with social media, and how nowadays we expect every artist to have some sort of opinion about whatever's happening in the world. in ways that like we didn't always used to ask of these celebrities. Now, of course, you know, artists have been activists since the beginning of time. Like, if you think of the civil rights movement, you had Sidney Poitier, Harry Belafonte, Ruby Dee, all of them. They were activists and they were artists. That was part of who they were. But like, there's a different thing going on now where we have like people demanding that The Rock say something about Israel and Palestine. And it's like, why do we want to know what The Rock thinks about Israel and Palestine? What is that like? What does that do? And I think that we are in a moment of reckoning where these expectations of celebrities who probably don't know anything about the things that we want them to make a statement about, like what are we asking? And I think part of the issue is that we want our pop culture, the things that we like, to just reaffirm who we are or who we think we are or who we think we want to be.
Yeah.
So there's this like weird desire to have like our alignment politically match up with like the silly shit that we're consuming.
Right. So what do you think are like the pros and cons of this? Or some of it's problematic and maybe some of it's, maybe there's some opportunity here or something liberating about it or democratic about it?
I think some of the pros are that, you know, sometimes there are campaigns or there's a groundswell of reaction to something like, I don't know, Scarlett Johansson being cast as a trans character, which is a real thing that happened like 5 or 6 years ago after she'd already been dragged for playing an Asian character in the Ghost in the Shell remake. There was outcry and then she was like, I'm not gonna do it. And I think things like that, like people holding creators to account for misguided creative choices, I think that can be a good thing. I think the negative thing is sort of what I've already talked about is, you know, this expectation that every single person say something, even if like saying like social media activism is just that. It's not actual activism. It's just saying something. Like, what are you doing outside of posting a black square or whatever? That's one downside. I also think the other downside is like just we've all, I think now we all know this term parasocial relationships. That's become a thing. And I think that that is a definite issue. We saw that with the Johnny Depp and Amber Heard trial from last year. And the fact that that really brought out some ugly, ugly misogyny and, you know, that as well as like the Megan Thee Stallion, Tory Lanez case, another example of just like all the ways in which all of these isms and phobias and agonies, misogyny, like all of that is really kind of like filtered through social media in a way that's so jarring. And I think is pronounced in ways that like, they happen in real life too, of course, obviously, but it feels even more insidious the longer you spend on it.
Right. So you talk about that, kind of that toxic environment in that chapter, the Kenny G chapter.
Yes.
Yeah.
Kenny
I like
G,
that chapter
by
a
the
lot.
way,
Yeah.
I don't know if you all know who he is, but he was a very famous jazz saxophonist who had like
Jazz, quote unquote.
Yeah, ersatz jazz had like middle America. Oop, didn't mean to do that. Had like middle America and my mother in a chokehold in the early '90s, and
Right.
God, it was terrible.
I worry about her. You're in your book, your dad seems like he's pretty cool, and then I hear about your mom doing this to you as a kid, playing Kenny G in the car all the time.
Yeah,
it's kind of traumatic.
I mean, it's weird because it's like she had Kenny G, but then she also was like obsessed with Marvin Gaye, and I'm like, yes, Marvin Gaye. Okay.
Right.
Also, Rod Stewart. She's seen Rod Stewart in concert. I don't know how many times.
Really?
But like, he has a couple of bops, but
yeah,
it's not really my thing.
Work with the Faces was pretty good. Anyways, so Kenny G though, you use him as an example too, right? Of like how we hate on things.
Yes.
And that just becomes associated with the person, and there's this deeper kind of vitriol there, right? in the chapter, you're basically saying he seems like a nice guy.
He does.
Right?
Well, I'm taking. I took a quote from him. There's a documentary that came out a couple years ago called "Listening to Kenny G." It is really good. It's even if you've never heard of him or whatever. It's a really interesting study in like criticism and also like tastes. And basically, this was just all about whether or not like Kenny G can be actually considered jazz or not, or like what does it mean that so many people liked this guy, but like so many people also hate him? And he's just like, I know some people hate me. It's okay. If I had made
stuffing his pockets.
Yeah, I was gonna say, if I had made like hundreds of millions of dollars, I too would be like, I don't care. Like, hate me all you want.
Right.
So like he's very game, but he says in that documentary, he's like, when people like something, you'll say like, I like this. Do you like this? And when they say, no, I don't really like this, it like comes at you like, oh, this is an affront to my entire being. And it's just not that serious. I mean, look, I wrote a whole book about this, so I take it seriously, but I'm not suggesting that everyone else needs to take it nearly as seriously as I do. I also don't like think that someone liking, well, we had a conversation about this. I'm pointing out Jesus here who we discussed this, but like, you like Iñárritu. I do not. I don't find his films very interesting, but you don't take it as a complete, like, I'm not hating on you. We just have different tastes, right? That's the way it should be. Sorry, I didn't mean to use you as an example, but like, you're right there, so.
So you talk about this from the perspective of a critic also, because there's this kind of hostility sometimes in that world of criticism, right? And pushback to that. And it seems like another reckoning is how do we respond to popular culture, right? And how do we talk about it in a productive way?
Yeah.
And you talk in the chapter Blackety Black about this. And in particular, on the topic of really kind of this explosion or renaissance of great Black films, great Black music in the past 5, 7, 8 years. And then you talk about how ironically at the same time we seem to be, this is all happening at this time that the internet's becoming increasingly a toxic place to talk about it. So can you explain that a little bit?
Yeah. When I was first developing my little like critic sea legs, as it were, and trying to figure out who I was and what I was drawn to and how I wanted to write and what I wanted to write about. I was coming from a place of, I'm young, I'm a Black person, and I don't see myself on screen as much as I would like to, or I don't see myself in the way I would like to. And so I was coming at it from like, oh man, Tyler Perry movie, he's ruining everything for all of us. And look, he's not a good filmmaker. Let's just say this. That's not a hot topic. That's not like a hot take.
You're a critic, you can say that.
It's not a hot take. Most people would agree he's not a good filmmaker, but he appeals to certain tastes, and I'm not gonna, dump on that. But there was a time when Tyler Perry was like the only option if you wanted to go to the movie theaters and see Black people in significant roles. He was giving some of the greatest actors of our time, Cicely Tyson, Viola Davis, roles when white Hollywood was not giving them roles. And so, coming out of that period, I can understand why, we wanted to be, by we, I mean like Black audiences and Black critics might have wanted to be a little bit more like careful about critiquing Black art in a negative way, or just like responding in a way that like, I don't like this, I don't think this is very good. Now though, like especially post like Atlanta, Insecure, Get Out, we have like way more options to choose from. And I'm not saying everything's honky-dory. Like obviously there's a lot of issues, and I think like the writer's strike, in many ways, if you paid close attention, a lot of the people of color who were on the picket lines were saying like, yes, we're all like writers and we're all this together, but like also we have it worse than our white, peers. We are getting paid less. We are not getting staffed full time on these shows. So obviously things are not perfect, but things are better and we have more things to choose from. And I don't believe that we should be afraid to critique Black art that isn't good. I think that we have to, in order to feel as though progress is actually happening, I think we have to treat Black art like we would treat any other kind of art because it deserves to be treated. It doesn't need to be treated with kid gloves. It doesn't need to be like, oh, this is so fragile. Like if I give this a negative review, they're never going to make another movie like it. That's not true. Like when I critiqued The Little Mermaid, the new one with Halle Bailey, I didn't like it. I thought it was, I don't know why they made it. Well, I know why they made it, but like why? And people came for me and they said, oh, you're anti-Black, or they didn't know I was Black, and they thought I was a white woman just because I gave it a negative review. They were like, they literally said in my tweet mentions, like, they're not gonna make these movies if you say this. And I'm like, first of all, no one today is Roger Ebert or Gene Siskel. Like, thumbs up, thumbs down. That's not the way like people decide to go see movies today, especially younger people like yourself. I'm sure you're not like, maybe if you're a film nerd, you might have your like film critics that you listen to and like you go off of that. But like most people are just like, watch the trailer. I might go see this, or like the girl or guy you're dating, you're like, oh, we want to go to the movies? All right, sure. What's playing? Like that's how people decide things. And so I take that as like my job as a critic is to be there for the people who want to read or listen to what I have to say, and maybe recommend some things that they might not be aware of. But it's also not my job to just like pretend I liked something or pull punches just because I'm worried that this something like this is not going to get made. The last thing I'll say about this, sorry, I don't mean to ramble, but the last thing I would say about this is that like, I will, if it's a first-time filmmaker, an independent filmmaker, or creator, and I'm not quite vibing with their work, I will go out of my way to try and like find something that I liked about it and sort of at least mention that, because I do think, those who are not like the Ava DuVernays or Shonda Rhimes of the world, like I want them to be able to make more art. I don't want to like decapitate someone early in their career, because like, I understand how hard it is to get a movie or a TV show off the ground. Most people don't come from money. They're not going to get it financed. So I am careful in that way, but I'm still going to, be truthful.
Has your like kind of feelings on that, your position on that, has it evolved over the years and depending on where you're working, like who your audience might be?
I don't think it's dependent on where I've worked. I think it's just dependent on sort of how I've just kind of evolved as a critic and a thinker. I kind of set new goals for myself every year, especially when it comes to like my viewing and listening habits. Like I don't always stick to them, or at least I don't, like all New Year's resolutions, like I don't necessarily stick with them all year round, but like I do try to, I've got like a subscription to Criterion Channel. So like I try to watch like 1 or 2 movies on that like I know nothing about, but I'm like, this looks interesting. Like some random foreign film from 1945. Just so I can like always have new things to be floating in my, in my brain that I could maybe come back to at another time in my work. Something that like inspires me to, go down a rabbit hole. That to me like is how I hope to evolve, continue to evolve. It's just like seek out new things while also like just enjoying the things that I know that I like.
In that that tension in criticism of Black art, in the chapter, you do some research and you recall like earlier moments even in college in Bell Hooks and James Baldwin and how other thinkers, and even you went back to other New York Times critics and looked at this and lo and behold, this very similar kinds of tension is there, right? About how to critique Black art in a way that seems both kind of responsive to the art form, but also aware of the social history that we're dealing with and the inequality in society.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think that like there's also this tendency, and I I understand this impulse. There's this tendency to like when you want to say we need more this, we need more that of like different kind of voices or different kinds of movies or TV shows being made. There's this tendency to either like willfully ignore or just like be completely just ignorant about what already exists that kind of aligns with that. Like we don't have to, pretend that 90s sitcoms were a great time for Black people in order to say, but also like we need to do better. Like Living Single exists. It was before Friends copied it. Like it was that was a thing that happened. We don't have to just pretend it didn't exist in order to make the case that like we need more things. And I think that does happen sometimes. There's Jennifer Lawrence said, what did she say? She gave an interview like a couple years ago, and she was like, "Oh yeah, when I did Hunger Games, I was like the first female action hero," and everyone was just like, "Jennifer." I'm sorry, Ripley from Alien was like 40 years before you. Let's also say like Sarah Connor, Terminator, and Angela Bassett in Strange Days. Like, come on, we don't have you can make your point about how we need more female action heroes without pretending that like female action heroes have never existed.
Right.
So yeah, there's this weird impulse that I want to get away from.
And you see that there's something, there's a sea change here, and women directors as well as Black directors succeeding on the big stage with the big budgets, making tons of money, right? That this is, in a sense, resetting the landscape a little bit for how we can talk about it too.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like this summer has been really interesting. It's been like the year of the woman in a way. Interestingly enough, I don't think there's any direct...
Mics start coming up, lining up. We're going to do Q&A.
I don't think there's any like direct connection between the fact that Roe was eradicated last year, but like it is funny that like we have that happen, and then we've got like Barbie, the Jennifer Lawrence movie, No Hard Feelings, Joyride, Bottoms, Beyonce, Taylor Swift, SZA, like all these like women just kind of killing it, and audiences like seeking, like wanting that,
right?
Because it has felt like there's been such a like dearth, especially in the landscape of music, where like women have been pushed to the side. And
who do you think are the like two most important people in pop music right now, most significant?
I mean, it's probably, well, I mean, what does that mean exactly?
Biggest like cultural impact, let's just say. Everything. Commercial success and cultural reach.
I guess Taylor. Sorry, Swifties. I don't, yeah. I would say Beyonce, but like we were talking about this earlier, Beyonce is interesting because like Beyonce doesn't, unlike Taylor, she's not really making music that like would appeal to a 12-year-old. Taylor's still very much like kind of high school. Whereas like Beyonce's singing about riding waves and surfboards and, cuffing it. And that's not happening with Taylor. And it's interesting. I didn't go to the Taylor Swift show, but like I know lots of people who did. They were largely women and dads who were bringing their like 12-year-old daughters. Whereas when I went to the Beyonce show twice, it was amazing. It was like, I'd say the median age was probably like 40.
Yeah.
And I didn't really see that many kids there. It was like lots of aunties, lots of all the queers, all the, and most of the queers were like, again, in their 30s and 40s. I didn't see too many super young people.
Right.
And I think that, like, I guess if you're saying like culturally speaking, I would say, you know, Beyonce is definitely up there career wise, but I think at this moment it's like, like Taylor is.
Yeah. Right.
She's just like, she's the NFL. Like, what the heck?
Yeah.
Granted, Jay-Z is
weird, right?
like, you know, he's got stake in the NFL. So I
Right.
guess you could also say, but
you think about like clout and kind of cultural power. Does anyone, male, female, or however you identify, touch either of them?
I mean, Rihanna comes close. Rihanna's not making any music, but she's a billionaire because
But most of her money's, well, not most, but
it's Fenty.
Yes.
But that's
fashion.
But that's culture.
It is. You're right.
And I've given her a lot of money for Fenty. I gotta say.
We have 2 microphones here, and I want you to come up and start asking questions. If you don't want to do that, just stay there. Sean has a question. Go ahead, Sean.
Thank you.
Especially the complexity around critiquing as a relationship to improving and not minimizing the contribution. My question to you is, do you see yourself going into that area of in the future with another book project or something to that effect? Because I believe you're onto something. Criticism is perceived as something is extremely negative, but it also needs to be interpreted as something that we don't.
Better now? Okay. So my question to you is, do you see yourself going into a potential book project that's kind of breaking down how pop culture can be a tool of navigating both the concept of criticism as a relationship to improvement when it comes to Black art and contributions and things of that nature, and not necessarily relating to anti-Blackness? So, and I know you mentioned because of a few others have had similar opinions about The Little Mermaid and how it was received as something completely different, but then rather something that can be improved upon given the nature of the topic. So I just wanted to put that out there for you.
Did you just give me my next book idea?
Great moment.
No, that's a really good question. I mean, I sort of get into it a little bit in that essay about at least my own approach to how I try to navigate these waters. But I do think what you said is like, there's this weird perception of like what film criticism is supposed to do from people who don't do it. And I think this is very much in line with the same thing that's happening with just journalism in general, where like people think that all journalists are leftists and are activists or woke. And like there's basically just like this complete breakdown of trust where they just like don't believe anything a journalist says. So I think it's like directly related to our current times. And I do think that like, it's hard because I do think maybe critics could try and be a little bit more clear about like what we think our jobs are. But then at the same time, like a lot of us do say it. Granted, it's on Twitter. It's a small part of the ecosystem, but like you can read a lot of critics, well-known critics like A.O. Scott or Manohla Dargis, who have talked about their process. You can also go back and look at, you know, critics who are no longer here, someone like Pauline Kael, like they talk about how they view the art. And I think like perhaps if more people kind of understood where we're coming from, they might, you know, be a little bit more forgiving. So thank you for that. The
question. Microphone will come to you, so just raise your hand and, or you can come to the front, either one. We'll take turns here. Soon you're next. We're gonna go with Sarah first. Go ahead.
Hi, my name's Sarah. I'm a third-year journalism student here. I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about how you and your team select what your episodes are going to focus on. I'm interested in podcasting, and I want to learn, like, how do you pick something that's entertaining for a listener, but also is going to generate some sort of, like, significant conversation and leave them reflecting after they've listened to the podcast?
Yeah, that is an evergreen question, and it's constantly shifting. Um, you know, in recent years, even before I joined the show, the team was making a kind of a very conscious effort that we wanted to expand our audience, which, you know, NPR, broadly speaking, still is like the audience skews older, skews wider. And in recent years, there have been efforts, not just at PCHH, but other places to like broaden the horizons, including like Spanish language podcasts. For our show, you know, we're to some extent kind of beholden to the release schedule of what is coming out. You know, as I was saying earlier, it's like, you know, this is the time of year when all the award season stuff is coming out. So we're going to cover most of those things. There's some things like that we know are coming out, but we're like, I don't know if our audience is really like interested in it. So maybe we'll wait until like it gets an Oscar nomination and then we'll cover it, because we do also very heavily cover the Oscars, because that's this kind of thing that like people who don't even pay attention to movies year round, like that's when they start tuning in. So it's kind of a balance between like, what do we think our audiences will like or like be listened to, and like what do we know that like they're going to want to hear us talk about. But also we do sometimes do smaller things, or we also have like a recurring segment called What's Making Us Happy. And that's every Friday show is us bringing recommendations. So we might scout something, and by scouting, it's like we're watching something to see if like, to just to see if we might want to cover. And if we're like, you know, I liked this, but I don't really know if like this is conversation worthy, like I might only have like one or two things to say, or like it doesn't really seem like our audience will be into it, then we'll just say, I'll just make it a happy. And then like, that's a way for us to at least say like, we liked this, people should check it out, but we're like not gonna have a whole conversation about it. So those are like kind of two of the main ways that we figure out what we want to do. But we're also often just trying to cover things that will bring in hopefully like younger folks like yourself. So we will sometimes cover more YA things. Like I think I mentioned Never Have I Ever earlier. Like Never Have I Ever. Like that's a show that's really meant to sort of appeal to high schoolers or college age students. I'm in my 30s. My co-hosts are older than me. So we're not just focused on what we are interested in, but we also really try to consider what like other groups might be interested in, and are constantly just trying to bring in different people.
Osman, go ahead.
Hi, my name is Osman. I'm a third-year public relations student in the honors program as well. And my question for you was, I'm in Dr. Sanders' like social media law and ethics class, and we always talk about diversifying like our media diets. But you said like inherently pop culture is politics, and so I think that point of like diversifying our pop culture diet is also really important. So like in terms of like, you know, the intersectionality of that, can you think of like other instances where you were discussing pop culture and it got picked up by media and like became like a point in like culture wars or anything like that, aside from that one example that you gave earlier?
Yes. Actually, like a few years after that piece, so I don't know if you all remember the Charlottesville, there were riots, the Proud Boys descending and getting all upset. So, you know, I was at Slate at the time, and someone, I don't actually remember how this conversation happened, but we were all like riffing on Slack. Do you all know what Slack is? It's like okay. I don't know. Sorry, I sound like an old fart. We're on Slack and someone mentioned, oh, did you know like Dolly Parton has like this weird kind of medieval times meets Gone with the Wind show at Dollywood, and it's like springtime for the Confederacy, and like it's weird that this exists. And you know, we were talking at this time about like all these Confederate monuments and the conversations about trying to take them down. And so then someone was like, someone should just go to this place and like check it out and then write about it. I volunteered myself, so I went down to Tennessee, Pigeon Forge, Tennessee, which
Right
is
next to Gatlinburg, if you need a point of reference.
yes, well, where Dollywood is. It's where Dollywood is.
That's right.
I went there and I went to the show, and I like went. There's actually two shows, and one of the things is like when you go at the time when you went to buy a ticket for the show, there are two sides you could sit on. There's the north side and there's the south side. And the south side was in the gray Confederate colors, and the north side was in the blue Union colors. And I go to this show, and it's like literally in this giant arena that sits thousands of people, and it was packed. And I think it's packed every day. And I go, and it's just like this bizarre ode to the Confederacy and like pig races. The pigs are named after like Robert E. Lee. There was a whole section with like indigenous people, but like I don't even know if they were actual indigenous performers. There was and it was all like Dolly songs. They were singing Dolly songs, but they were like clear iconography of the Confederacy. And so I wrote about this. I was just like, this is my review of the show. It's ironic that this show is like so huge and no one seems to question this like, and look, Dolly is she's a wonderful lady. She's donated lots of library books. She's great. She's written some of the greatest songs of all time. She seems like a lovely person, but she has this like show that is just pretending like slavery was all good. And I wrote this piece and I critiqued it. And, you know, the people of the South did not like it. And they're like, who's this Northerner? Who's this Yankee coming down and criticizing the show? Dolly's donated all these books. How dare you? And it turned into a whole thing. Luckily, I had a lot of friends who like, some of whom who were like huge Dolly fans. And they were like, I didn't even know that this existed. And also, you're right. And oh, the kicker, sorry, you should read the piece. It's very good. I wrote it. But the kicker is that I went to the bathroom, and the bathroom stalls had Southerners only and Northerners only on it, which is like, if you know about the civil rights era, it's like whites only water fountains and blacks only, colored people. And I was like, how?
Right.
So that was another piece that like just kind of turned into a whole thing. It wasn't quite on the Megyn Kelly scale, but like I remember having to do a lot of press for it. And like the great thing, this was like civic journalism. She changed. It was originally called Dolly's Dixie Stampede. She got rid of the Dixie part. They got rid of the Northern. I was told, because I had someone who read the piece. She's like, I went to the show like a few weeks later, and she got rid of the Northerners only, Southerners only thing. And apparently they also got rid of like most of the like Confederate slash Union symbolism.
Yeah.
So yeah, she was turning like the Civil War into this weird like entertainment.
Right.
Very Gone
Amusement
with
park.
the Wind. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So, yeah.
More questions. Katie, go ahead.
Hi, my name is Katie. I'm a sophomore corporate communication student, also in the honors program. I enjoyed the talk as well as your book. But I wanted to ask, I feel like something I observe a lot with people, like a lot of people our age in this room, is as much as we are critical and enjoy being critical towards work, there's also like an appreciation, comfort almost with more of like low culture or easy things. So, you know, I'm thinking, say, like Twilight, or in terms of things that are just easy, simple, like Taylor Swift. Two things that, you know, I'll admit to being a fan of. All that to say,
You don't have to admit. This is just be proud. Wave that flag.
All that to say, what do you think about kind of like this openness maybe to certain things, even old things I looked at different ways? And also, do you have a piece of media that it's just more of a comfort thing? You're like, maybe this isn't great, maybe this isn't perfect, but you enjoy it as a comfort, nostalgic piece.
Oh, that's like probably a quarter of my consumption. It's like, this is not good, but I love it anyway. Fast and Furious franchise, Sex and the City, and its really awful reboot that I can't help but keep watching because it's just like, I can't believe they're doing this. You know, there's a lot of...
You were talking about some reality shows.
Oh yeah, I watch a lot of reality TV, but like, look, I don't feel proud of this, but like I'm not a watch rich people do things reality person. Like it just makes me be like, you don't deserve any of this. Here I am, like barely able to pay rent and all the various living things, and you don't do anything, and you can have all of this. So that doesn't make me happy. But I do like to watch people who like ostensibly are worse off than me when it comes to reality TV. So I'll watch like Catfish, Teen Mom.
We got some fans out here.
Is fan the right word? I don't know.
I don't know the show at all.
But yeah, I watch a lot of that. I'm not proud of it, but it is kind of just like it's a way for me to turn off my brain. And Love is Blind. We actually did an episode on Love is Blind. It was that was a great conversation. We did it on not this past season, but I think it was 2 seasons ago. Mm-hmm. We don't do every season because it's like once you've seen one Love is Blind, you've seen it all pretty much.
So it's 1:30, but we'll take some more questions for a while because we're just getting into the good stuff, right?
Yeah.
Jalen, go ahead.
Asking me all the personal questions.
Jalen, then Sarah, and then we'll go over there. Okay, Jalen, Sarah, and then over there.
So I read Wannabe. Well, the entire class did. Oh, my name. I'm Jalen. We met already,
Yes.
but freshman advertising major. So in the chapter of Wannabe, Blackity Black, you discuss Black people who are praised by like white critics, sellouts, shuck and jivers, coons. And to my understanding of the book, you kind of go into define like what real and fake Blackness is.
Yeah.
And I know this is a loaded chapter, but can you summarize what you meant by that like portion of it?
I'm glad you asked that question. Dave kind of tipped me off to this, and he said that some people in his class took me at face value when I was saying those things. And that was actually me sort of like putting on a little satirical hat.
Being like the moral police kind of.
Yeah, because I don't, if you know my work at all, that is not who I am at all. I don't believe in positive or negative art. I think that there are some things that are ostensibly like showing bad things, negative things. I think of something like Back That Ass Up. Classic, great song. Juvenile. If it comes on in the club, I'm going to be getting down to that. Is it like respectful of women? I don't know, but I don't care because it's a good ass song. But what I wanted to say with that sort of section is that like there are certain people, that was me putting on a voice for certain people, certain respectability politics, Black people, who would say, anytime there's cursing, anytime, you call a woman a bitch, this is like unacceptable. This is the downfall of our race. This is terrible. And I don't think like that. But I think oftentimes when Black people are discussing Black art, it often comes down to like, is this good for us or is this bad for us? And not like, is it good? Because there's a difference. Good for us, bad for us, like we're not a monolith. We're all different. And when we get into those modes, that often means we body shame, we class shame. We say like, oh, you dress like this, so you must be like a certain type of person. And I think that that's like a very slippery slope. And me sort of including that voice in the chapter was my way of like calling it out. And then in the section, in the rest of the essay where I sort of get into unpacking all of that, that's my saying like, look, there's good to be found in, even I trash Tyler Perry, but like, and the dialogue is terrible, but Viola Davis is still really good in whichever movie. I don't know which movie she was in. Mm-hmm. They all blur together. There's always a mad Black woman in the,
And there's funny stuff.
Yeah, and there's funny stuff. So yeah, it was satire. That's the too long didn't read version of the answer to that question.
Sarah, and then we'll go back here for questions. We got a few people who want to go. Mm-hmm.
Hi, I'm Sarah. I'm a first year public relations student, and also wanted to just add, as someone, my Midwestern Dolly loving family also like attended the Stampede at one point, and I can also say very wild experience.
Also, the plate, like the food,
I was about to say they don't give you silverware.
they don't give you. You're supposed to eat like everything with your hands, including the soup. They give you like a bowl of chowder or soup
They
or something,
dropped
and you're supposed to like drink it like you're a caveman.
They dropped an entire rotisserie chicken in front of me. I was 12.
Entire
They were like, "Eat
rotisserie
with your
chicken."
hands. And I was like, what are you talking
I'm thinking
about?
of maybe going now. This sounds like my kind of place.
There's like a
Yeah, in my piece I wrote like it was fine. It was good, but not quite Cracker Barrel. Like that's what it was.
Right.
the food
Sorry.
was fine. But I was like remember I got like shot back when you said that. I was like, why did they make me eat with my hands? Anyways, but alternatively, I wanted to ask you, with Pop Culture Happy Hour, was there any episodes that you like particularly enjoyed, or was there an episode additionally that you found particularly challenging to cover?
Yeah. So I did this like last year. NPR has like a program. The name has changed a little bit, but like within NPR, there's a sort of like workshop program where if you work at NPR, you can apply to pitch an idea for a potential podcast or show, and then like go through a process of trying to create a pilot that maybe eventually gets picked up somewhere, whether it's at NPR or at like a different station. So I had an idea that actually dated back to like years before for a sort of history film podcast modeled in a similar way of like You Must Remember This, if you're familiar with that podcast. Narrated, scripted, and interviews. I wanted to interview various people, and the focus was let me talk about 3 movies and how they were very contentious at the time of the release because of how they represented a certain group of people. So I covered The Godfather and how it represented Italian Americans and the idea of the gangster in film, The Color Purple, and the sort of very stark contrast in reactions to the original movie between Black women and Black men. And then Basic Instinct and how the LGBT community responded to that. So I did that program, came out with a pilot for The Godfather, and then after that was able to put together those other 2 episodes and like package them for Pop Culture Happy Hour. It came out last year. You can search for it. It's called Screening Ourselves. Each episode is about like 45-ish minutes long. But that was definitely a challenge because Pop Culture Happy Hour is a conversational podcast. This was all scripted, and I was scripting it myself. And as I think I mentioned earlier, like scripting for audio is very different from writing a piece. And so I really had to and thankfully I had mentors within the program, and my editor and producer were very helpful in like helping me sort of edit down and find tape. There's a lot of, I did a lot of research. There's a lot of like trying to find audio tape, and NPR has like a very rich archive of old episodes. So I was actually able to like find episodes, old radio programs from like 1972 that were all about Italian Americans and how much they hated The Godfather when The Godfather came out. And I was able to like use that archival audio in the piece. So yeah, I'm really proud of those 3 episodes, but they were also like some of the most challenging things I've ever had to produce.
We had some hands here. You had your hand up. Go there, and then we'll go over to the right side of the room. Go ahead.
Hi, I'm Kendall. I'm a first-year journalism major, and you mentioned something about how you called Tyler Perry a filmmaker, and as much as I love media, I would never consider Tyler Perry as a filmmaker.
Oh, say more. I mean, he does make films.
You were saying that he makes a movies, but with Black characters, but they're not for us. So why do you think that he's starting to do that? Because there's definitely been like a shift in like his recent TV shows and films. And then outside of like financial gain and popularity, why do you think he does that? And then how can we as like a society like work against that and like move like toward like a better future for like Black Hollywood?
Well, who's us? Because like there's a lot of Black people who love Tyler Perry, and that's why he's been able to get to the point that he's at. But I think I understand your question. I don't really think Tyler Perry is like an issue anymore. in part because like he doesn't have like the chokeholds on white Hollywood that he used to. Like there's a time where you could ask like any sort of white person in Hollywood or even a white critic, like, what do you think of like a Black movie? Like the first thing I think of is Tyler Perry. There's a critic who wrote a piece about the movie Girls Trip and like tries to compare that movie to a Tyler Perry movie. And I'm like, have you ever, like, is Tyler Perry the only Black reference point you have? Like, I mean, Spike Lee is also right there. He's the complete opposite of Tyler Perry. I think that like, I think Tyler Perry is like, he exists. He doesn't like to employ writers for some reason. He does all the writing himself, which I think is another reason why he's not a very good filmmaker. He's not really a collaborative person in that sense. But I think there's so many other filmmakers who are doing way more interesting things. I mean, we talked about me suggesting stuff. So like if you want to find filmmakers who are more interesting, I can suggest a few.
Throw some out.
Nikyatu Jusu. She made one of my favorite movies of last year. It's Nanny. I believe it's streaming on Amazon, but it's like a horror film about a Black, I think she's Senegalese immigrant who's a nanny for this wealthy white couple in Manhattan, and then weird things start to happen. And it's like, you know, it's bringing up all these like African folklore imagery. It's genuinely haunting and it's beautiful and really moving. We need more things like that. We need more creators like that. Trying to think who else I would recommend. It's coming out, I think this week or next week. It's called All Dirt Roads Taste of Salt. I am forgetting the filmmaker's name. I think it's Raven something, but Barry Jenkins produced it, and it's like an experimental film that covers a Southern Black family from the point of view of a Black woman and multiple generations. I don't know if that answered your question, but like there are far bigger problems in Hollywood than Tyler Perry. That is my, that's my opinion.
We'll take two more. We have two more right there. You go there and then over there. Oh, there's two hands right next to each other. Sorry, man.
Hi, I'm Caitlin Castillo. I'm a first year.
Oh, sorry. I was thinking I
saw
couldn't
you
okay.
looking. So
yeah.
I'm a first year journalism student. It's been really nice to listen to your talk and your ideas and answers to these questions. So I was wondering, you studied theater and cinema. So I was wondering how going into these mediums like print, digital, audio, how you've kind of found your voice. Has it changed? Is it something that you're still developing? And just like how to get acclimated to the journalism world as someone who didn't study it specifically, and how you've just like honed your craft over time.
Yeah, I mean, I tell every college group that I talk to, unless you're trying to be like a doctor or a, you know, surgeon or physicist or something, you can major in whatever you want, and your career might look very, very different 5-10 years from now. My co-host Linda is an ex-lawyer. There's a lot of ex-lawyers because law doesn't seem that fun. You know, I think that one of the great things though about my background in theater and film studies is that, well, the film studies I'm obviously applying directly, but like theater also helped me, you know, develop my voice as a performer. And yes, I am a journalist. I'm not like a hardcore journalist going out and like, you know, reporting on the news, but I am in some ways like, I am talking about pop culture, and there is an element of performance when you are doing radio or TV. So I definitely have used a lot of the skills that I learned in theater to this day in my job as a podcaster.
Two quick ones and we gotta go.
Great, thank
Right, red shirt and then white and then we gotta go, sorry.
Hi, my name is Cameron. I'm a second-year journalism major here. I've loved listening to the discussion and everything. My question was more about something touched on earlier, just with the pros and cons of wanting to affiliate yourself with your pop culture groups. I feel like a big part of that comes in social media. So I was wondering, like, leveraging the pros and the cons, if you'd call social media and its current culture something more constructive or destructive in society.
Both. Yeah, I mean, it is what you make of it, right? I think that you can make it a constructive place, and it can be a way for you to connect with people who like you would never otherwise connect with. I think Tumblr was like such a great space for people to like indulge in their creative skills of like creating fan fiction and like, you know, just connecting with other people, especially if you were, you know, like me and kind of the loner in school and like weren't the most sociable person. Like, here you are, you can talk to people online. But then, of course, it is destructive because we know that looking at Instagram makes us all feel worse about our lives. We know that people are mean, really mean to people that they can't put a face to. So yeah, it's both.
Mm-hmm. Go ahead.
Hi, my name is Jacob. I'm a first-year journalism student, and I just want to say for the record that my family and I love Dollywood.
I've still never been. I only went there for like the Dixie Stampede thing, but I do want to go to Dollywood.
I know it's pretty great. My question was, and I'm so sorry, I'm not super familiar with the show, so I don't even know if this is a topic that y'all have discussed or like would even consider discussing or have an opinion on.
Mm-hmm.
But there's a current pop culture movement surrounding the country music industry where the popularity of some of the top artists is moving away from the traditional like Nashville sound.
Yeah.
And
Morgan Wallen and
it's something that's a lot more raw, something a lot more emotional from artists like Zach Bryan, Chris Stapleton, Tyler Childers. And people are kind of comparing it to like a Nirvana movement in the 90s where like alternative rock and grunge kind of took over the mainstream. Did you have any opinion on like those comparisons or just like this new movement that's happening in that industry?
That is a great question, and that is not in my wheelhouse. But I will say, because I study music to a certain extent, but I'm more of a TV film person when it comes to new stuff. I have listened to quite a few podcasts, though, about this very thing, just because I'm generally interested in about it. And I'm going to recommend a podcast to you that you should listen to for probably more informed opinion on this. It's called Popcast. It's the New York Times music podcast. They have really interesting conversations, and they cover kind of this country and this like movement, this weird place that it's at right now, more in depth than I ever could. So Popcast is what it's called.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Let's all thank Aisha Harris for being here. Thanks so much, Aisha. It was a lot of fun.
Thank you.